So this is the special meeting of the Woodbridge Conservation Commission. Today is March 18th, 2021. And we are going to start the meeting with public comments. Public comments were meant to be emailed to me prior to the start of the meeting tonight, and I did receive two, and I was asked to read them into the record. So I'm going to bring them up and read each one. So bear with me, one of them is a bit longer than the other. The first one is from John Carangelo, and I don't have an address on this one, but I'll go ahead and read it through. This is a letter that he had sent to the Board of Selectmen. He wanted it read into the record for conservation as well. And his letter dated March 15th, 2021 reads as follows. Dear Board of Selectmen of the town of Woodbridge, it has come to my attention that some individuals continue to challenge the proposed turf fields at Amity High School. As you know, Orange, Bethany, and Woodbridge voted on and approved the turf fields at Amity. Further, this board and zoning board approved the Amity project to move forward, and that decision was appealed by these select few, and subsequently they withdrew their appeal. Now, the same group is attempting to circumvent the process of the will of the voters by changing an ordinance in town because certain chemicals in the turf are allegedly dangerous to the environment and kids who play on them. If this ordinance is changed, then construction would be halted yet again. As a parent of a senior and junior at Amity, I find this attempt to be deplorable because this has adversely affected my children who play sports at Amity. In addition, the surrounding towns were forced to defend these claims at a financial cost to each of its residents. What these individuals fail to realize is that the exact field being proposed has been vetted by Yale University and the New England Patriots, to name a few. In addition, every school except Amity has turf fields, so I find their argument unpersuasive. Therefore, I respectfully request that this board deny the petition to change the ordinance so that our voters and children get what they voted for over a year ago. Thank you for your time and attention, John Carangelo. So that was the first public comment.
Not sure if he's in Woodbridge or Orange, though. But anyway.
So the second letter, let's see here. This one's a bit longer, so hold on. I'm not a speed reader. This one comes from Rick Bordeaux from 75 Maple Vale Drive. And this is a letter to the commission.
There's a John Carangelo who's on the Board of Selectmen in Orange.
Oh, okay.
Or was. Okay. Anyway.
So Rick Bordeaux writes to the Woodbridge Conservation Commission. First, full disclosure, I am only a 20-year resident of Woodbridge. I'm a proud Amity High School graduate, parent of a 2016 graduate, a social studies teacher at the high school, and one of the girls' flag football coaches. I am dismayed that a small group of people, yet again, are trying to hold up the already approved installation of field turf at Amity High School. Back in July, I submitted for public comment my thoughts regarding this matter. I reiterate my main points to you at this time. I've been a strong proponent of an athletic facilities upgrade at the high school. We have needed it for a while, not just for the athletic teams and the total student body, but for the Bethany Orange Woodbridge community as well. The information provided by the district before the referendum clearly details this, so I will not rehash it here. Don't get me wrong, I'm not a proponent of installing a field that will make people sick just because we need to keep up with everyone else. However, the health concerns raised by the anti-turf field petitioners, crumb rubber, lead, etc., as used in the field turf product, were inconclusive then and remain inconclusive today. As of this date, there has not been any definitive rulings about the dangers of these materials. And he references a website at fairwarning.org who had an article titled, "No Verdict in Sight on Safety of Crumb Rubber Fields, Prompting Angst All Around." I believe that the URL includes crumb rubber and cancer in the wording, so I'm guessing that's what that article references. His letter continues, these concerns have been around for years and appropriately should be voiced, and were during the public debate before the referendum. However, regardless of one's stance on the long-term safety of fields manufactured with these materials, delaying and/or halting construction at this point in the process based on these concerns is tantamount to nullifying the results of an election. I didn't think the evidence regarding health concerns was strong enough to make that drastic step back in July, and I don't think so now. Furthermore, the process concerns repeatedly raised by the field turf opponents, ambiguous ballot wording not publicized adequately, etc., continue to be unfounded. The district did not hide the fact that all-weather turf means artificial turf. The district provided details about the specific product to be installed. The district made announcements and shared detailed information about the project via traditional and social media outlets, as well as their website and public forums. There was ample signage announcing the date and polling locations for the referendum all around 3 towns. In the end, there was plenty of time for people to become educated on the issues and voice their opinions. I'm confident that it'd hold up in a court of law. Finally, I admit that the PFAS issue brought up by the anti-turf field petitioners last summer gave me pause. They contend that the dangers of PFAS came to light after the referendum. However, a full week before the referendum, Field Turf addressed the concerns with PFAS in a letter dated October 25th, 2019. This letter is on page 18 of packet part 1 for the July 8th, 2020 Board of Selectmen meeting, posted on the Board of Selectmen page on the Town of Woodbridge website and last accessed by me on July 7th, 2020 at 11 a.m. Note, Field Turf did not downplay the potential dangers of PFAS. They stated that their supplier confirmed that their products are free of PFAS, PFOS, and fluorine. They go on to say that they care deeply about the safety of our products to ensure that they remain free from these substances. I am sure that they stand by that statement today. This renders the PFAS concerns as it relates to their proposed construction irrelevant to our situation. After considering the pros and cons, the Bethany Orange Woodbridge electorate approved the referendum. No evidence has been presented since that would warrant nullifying that result. Those leading the charge against installing this turf are alarmist at best and politically motivated by a vocal minority that is upset the results of the referendum did not reflect their point of view at worst. That is not the way democracy is supposed to work. Even with that, I do not dismiss their concerns. Instead, I believe that the benefits to the school and the greater community at this point in time of the process outweigh them. I'm in favor of moving forward with this project. And that was Rick Bordeaux from 75 Maple Drive. All right, I need a drink of water. That was a lot of reading.
Well, we should thank, because this will be viewable obviously on CT or on our little channel after. So we thank them for providing feedback, and then
yes. Yep. And I did thank both of them and let them know that I would be reading their letters into the public comments part of our meeting this evening. Okay. There were no other public comments, so we're going to move on to the next agenda items here. The first is to review and approve the minutes of the January 21st meeting. And I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
Tracy, a second.
Tracy, are you taking notes?
Nope.
Okay.
Any discussion about the January minutes? All right, having no discussion, I'll move the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any abstentions?
Yeah, I abstain. I wasn't there. This is Frank.
Frank, okay. The next item is the minutes for the February 18th. And I will again make a motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
Tracy will be my second. Any discussion around those?
No.
Not hearing any discussion. I'll move the motion. All in favor? Aye. Frank?
I abstain again.
Okay.
wasn't there, so I'm abstaining.
You are allowed to vote. And the last one is the February 25th meeting. We've got so many backed up here. I'll make a motion to approve those minutes.
Second.
Tracy seconds. Discussion. All right, we'll move the motion forward. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Next item on the agenda. The 2021 Trails Day is coming up. And for those that aren't aware, this is an annual event that happens throughout the state. The state of Connecticut promotes a Trails Day to get people out and active. It is the first weekend in June. In 2020, it was sort of messy for reasons of the pandemic. But in 2021, Massaro Community Farm reached out and asked if we would like to join them in co-sponsoring a Trails Day using the nature trail at the Massaro Farm. I thought it was a great idea. I had a chance to talk to Corey, the education director up there, and he would like to have a small group, perhaps limited by registration, just to make sure we've got adequate social distancing and also not getting to such a large group that people can't hear what is being said. The idea of the walk would be to use the nature trail to talk about a number of topics. Corey was going to come up with pinning down one in particular, but several topics that were brought up included Native Americans in the area, and foraging for food, the food chain, and environmental and climate change impacts on food. And I thought those were all good options. I think it's important for our trail walks to have some angle to them, more than just going out and walking a trail. So I thought it was fantastic. I wanted
Do
to
we
bring it,
need a motion?
well, I just wanted to bring it to this group for any further discussion.
What
Any
day?
thoughts?
Saturday or Sunday? Do we know?
Don't know. We didn't specify which day of the first weekend in June. Is there?
Will there also be a tour of Massaro at the same time? Because if people are coming to Massaro, they probably want to see that also.
I think that'll just sort of be a bonus add-on for sure.
Uh-huh.
And I had volunteered to be there representing conservation. I know the trail and the farm very well myself.
Is this the trail that Louisa Cunningham started?
Yep.
Might be nice to
Highlight,
put something in there in regards to honoring her.
definitely.
I could work on that.
All right. I don't know if we need to make a formal motion on this, but if anyone would like to make a formal motion that we participate in Trails Day with Massaro.
I'll move. I think it's a really great thing.
All right.
I think it's a good idea.
All right. So Tim, did you want to second Sharon's motion? Okay. So the motion is to participate in a joint Trails Day event at Massaro
Yes.
Farm.
Mhm.
Okay.
You had initially said co-sponsor. I mean, they don't want any funding.
Yeah. Co-sponsor sounds good.
But that sounds like we're maybe funding. Are we,
We do have small budget. Like, we could buy some bottled water.
I mean, we're committing to funding anything. I guess that's my question.
Correct. We are not. No, we are just offering our name and
branding.
and branding, and I'll be there as a body to help organize people on the day of.
Sounds good.
All right. Any other discussion?
Can others of us be there, or do you think we should leave the spaces open for non?
I think right now, I think we should all feel welcome to join it. If we do find that there's an excessive amount of people signed up, maybe we do, or it ends up breaking into several groups. And that way you can still accommodate the same amount of people. It's just that you're going off in two different directions or at two different times.
That's
And
good.
Jason, certainly let us know if there's additional hands needed for the sort of organizing part of it.
All right, will do. Thank you. All right, if there's no other discussion, I will call the motion. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right, well, it's unanimous. Next item is an update on the tree swallow birdhouses. This is a topic that came up back in our November meeting. It was a effort put forward by the Mononkatuk Audubon Society and their group of volunteers in town. I think it was Boy Scouts that were going to place the poles and the birdhouses. And the idea was to have them put up in March or April to accommodate the migration of the tree swallows. And Sharon and I had some additional discussions with Dennis Riordan from the Audubon Society. It sort of stalled. We probably should have taken this up a month ago to get the recommendations out, but we are here today, and I'd like to move it forward. In a earlier discussion, we had identified a number of locations around town, and I'm gonna see if I could do a quick screen share here, just to refresh memories. There we go. So this was the document that we had reviewed in our November meeting to talk about the potential locations. I'm pretty sure we had decided that Fitzgerald was not an ideal one to go through. We did add the potential of the former country club. And the other thought that had come out of that meeting was who will maintain them and whether we needed to have a memorandum of understanding with the Mononkatuk Audubon Society so that it's clear to the town, since these are being placed on town-owned property, who will be responsible for them. So I reached out to Dennis, and he did get back to me saying, yep, it would be great if we could move on these quickly. And as for maintenance, he felt as though the scouts could be tagged as the people responsible and that Mononkatuk would train them to maintain the birdhouses. And just for some additional visual, I'll go past Fitzgerald. This is the Pease Place. So there were some agricultural fields sort of to the north end of the playground area. We talked about approaching Massaro and putting a couple in the agricultural fields as well as the sort of the non-agricultural fields. And then over on the Darling House area, the Darling House is in this picture down here. So these fields are all agriculture to the north. And for those that know the area, the Blue Trail actually cuts through this field roughly in this area.
Jason, are we considering all or one of these sites?
But they had made available up to 20 birdhouses. So these three locations that I quickly breezed through, Pease, Massaro, and Darling, those would accommodate over 20. So it could be all three. It could be heavily slanted towards one. Just for example, the Darling House field could support many more. There's a potential for 12 at that location.
I think
Jason, do we
Darling
have
House would be a good location. Go ahead.
Yeah.
Go ahead, Sharon.
no, do we have an agreement that the Boy Scouts are willing to be trained and maintain them?
We do not. We do not.
Well, I think we should get that before we move forward.
I was hoping we wouldn't stall it too much since the tree swallows are in their migration at this point. Would it be appropriate? Let me stop the share. And to move this forward with our recommended locations of those 3 parcels and our recommendation that a memorandum of understanding be drafted between the Boy Scouts and the town for maintenance purposes. And
Yeah,
And then just let the town take care of it from there.
yeah, because
Yes.
my concern is that if they aren't maintained, they could actually be a way that, you know, all the critters that they're trying to prevent from attacking these birds would be likely, you know, if the shield that, the snake shield and stuff were damaged, then it actually would be killing these birds more than helping them. So I think the maintenance is a key piece, but I think we can decide that those are places that we think are appropriate ecologically and discreet and useful, and send it on to the next stage. That would be my opinion.
So I would write a letter to the town and Board of Selectmen with the recommendations of Peace Place, Darling House, and Massaro, with the understanding that we would have to get agreement from Massaro for sure.
And maybe a backup of the dump,
The transfer station, yep.
transfer
Yep.
station.
I think I'd also highlight in our letter the importance of maintenance because of like what Sharon said, with invasive species, it could be create more of a problem than a benefit.
Yeah, and that if they cannot be maintained, they should be removed.
Right. Or not go forward with it.
Or do it in a
And
more
which-
limited way. If they think they can maintain 5 of them and not 20 of them, start with that for this year and see how they do.
Jason, can you remind me which Boy Scout troop this is?
Oh, that's right, we've got multiples. Let's see how quickly I can pull that up. This is going back to November. This was Boy Scout Troop 63.
Which is the troop associated with, yeah, and I always get mixed up with the numbers. 63. I'll look that up.
Okay.
Thank you.
Should we send a letter also to the head, to that troop and directly, or do you think we'd send it to the town? How would we?
To make it simple and just to move it along, I think it would just be easier to make our recommendations to the town and let the town hash out the.
And have the Nantucket people communicate with the town and with the Boy Scouts and carry it on.
I assume they've already been talking, the Audubon people have been talking to the Boy Scouts.
Yeah, this goes even further back. I think the original message came.
Yeah.
I think the expectation was that they were going to be installed last year.
Hmm.
I do have a letter from Dennis going back to September of 2020. So I think, there was some-
we should move.
Yeah.
Excuse me. I think we should move it forward as long as we have some kind of agreement between the Boy Scouts and Dennis that they will be maintained or removed if they're not maintained.
All right, so I'm going to make a motion that I'll write a letter that will identify the locations, maintenance needs, and the parties involved.
I second.
All right. Any more discussion? I think I've got it all. All right, I'll call the vote. All in favor?
I just have one thing for the motion.
Aye.
Should we say which land you're specifically talking about in the motion?
I think I've got it here. It's Pease, Darling, Massaro, and transfer. Old
Okay.
landfill.
All right, I still second. Sorry.
All right, and you were in favor?
Aye.
All right,
Aye.
good. All right. Moving along here. So the next one is, this is a sort of a big update. This is an update on the high school turf field. We had sent a letter to the Board of Selectmen and Amity Board of Ed recommending a moratorium on the installation until certain criteria were met. I received notice from a resident that they believe that there's been forward progress being made over there. They seem to see that there was an increasing number of hardscape materials, drainage pipe, landscape netting and whatnot being delivered on site. Let's see, I've got a bunch of updates here, so bear with me. And then we'll talk a little bit about it. The letter of warranty, which TPZ had made a requirement to getting the permit. There was a letter of warranty provided, but the town council felt that it did not meet the standards that TPZ had set forth. So it did not include anything about independent lab testing. I don't know if that's going to have any impact on the process moving forward at this point. Sharon and I started to speak with Inland Wetland. I'll take blame at not actually moving it forward, mostly due to my work schedule. I've not been able to find any time during the day to have a meaningful connection with the town at this point. Wetlands, they might choose to take it up again if we ask them, but they might not.
Are we going to ask them maybe for a joint meeting to talk about it, or?
They were very skeptical, I've got to say. They were not, they feel like they've already dealt with it.
Right.
And Chris Sullivan feels like it's a completely fait accompli.
Have they
So-
voted on it?
There was no formal vote. They sort of passed. Because it technically is outside the 100-foot upland review area
How so?
by 15 feet. If the turf field was 15 feet further east, it would hit that magic number. My reading of the state regs and the agency regs is that the 100-foot is just a recommendation. They could expand it on a case-by-case basis if they felt it was, if it was warranted. So I think we could approach them and try to make a more formal case that there could be environmental impacts that they ought to be considering. And we had talked about this in the past with the aquatic species, the water runoff, the groundwater quality. Yeah.
Is it 100 feet from Racebrook River, from residences, from what?
From
Designated wetlands?
Yeah, wetland soil. Yeah. And as I had shown in the past, the football field is on wetland soil, but because it has been previously manipulated by man, according to inland wetlands, it's no longer under their review. It is no longer part of a wetland soil.
Because it's been fertilized, you mean?
Because it's been dug up with, there is a drain system under the football field of some kind. And then there's the track put around it and the bleachers put there. So
There's no wetland soil there anymore.
I mean, you
Is
could
that what
argue
you're
that
saying?
if you go down 3-4 feet, there probably is still some hard soil
Okay.
under there that is poorly drained, which is what makes it wetland soil.
I mean, forgetting the football field, aren't we concerned about runoff to other
Yes.
locations?
Yes, we are. And runoff in our town, I believe, falls under TPZ, not under wetland.
Got it. Okay.
It's an odd split. And kind of leads me into the next discussion point. I have talked with the state DEEP and DPH on the topic.
Groundwater or surface water? I'm sorry.
Surface water, stormwater runoff. Yeah.
Oh, okay.
So DEEP and DPH tend to not get involved in these matters unless there's a proven problem. So they tend to be a bit more reactive than proactive with their approach. And I am still awaiting a response from DEEP about the species of concern that's in the area. I expect their response by the end of April. I'm not sure how that'll actually change anything in the grand scheme of things other than identifying what species it is and what impact how it may be impacted if there is pollutants in the runoff. I was pointed at a study out of Franklin, Massachusetts, where there was a pile of the turf that had been set out on some property, and there was prolonged leaching of chemicals into their groundwater and a higher elevated count of those chemicals, particularly because the PFAS, that's PFAS, that's an acronym for those that don't know, and I'm not going to be able to try to pronounce it, but they are chemicals that do not break down. They stay in the soil or in the water. They don't ever go away, at least not in a meaningful amount of time in the sense of humans and health. A couple other items. The manufacturer of the field turf product, as well as the Turf Industry Council, they cite that their products do not pollute. I will take that as what it is coming from the manufacturers. My personal experience is that they're trying to sell us a product, so they're going to make it look like a fantastic product. So I always have a large block of salt to take with recommendations coming from salespeople.
Cigarettes don't cause cancer either.
Right. Yeah, exactly. There are studies that have been proven, scientific studies, numerous ones that have proven that the chemicals do leach from turf fields, including PFAS, lead, chromium, and zinc levels that are toxic to aquatic wildlife. And again, as I had mentioned, they do not break down, they build up, so they can bioaccumulate in people. Lead in particular doesn't really go anywhere. And the other point is, and I believe I'd sent around a link and maybe a diagram to everybody about the movement of water as it goes into the soil. And it's important to note that the high school is at a high elevation in our town. And it is also arguably at the headwaters to both the Race Brook, which is the Race Brook that the road is named after, as well as the Weppawag River. Both of those are surface waters that roll downhill into town. One goes by my house, and it goes through many properties. So the potential of these chemicals to get into the groundwater where they do not break down and move through the ground, potentially polluting well water, is of a particular concern. That is my summary of and updates.
Jason, a clarification on the comments you made about Franklin, Massachusetts, I believe.
Yes.
Was the material that sounded like it was a bunch of it that was just left sitting
Yes.
for some period of time? Do we know how long, or just?
So I'll do a quick screen share just so people can see. This was the visual that went along with the article.
Okay. Now, and I'm not, if you don't know how long it was sitting there, that's fine, but I was curious. Is that the exact material?
So that says for 2 years.
Okay. Is that the exact material that will be installed at Amity?
This article, and I only had a chance to skim it, did not specifically call out the manufacturer, but I had heard from another resident in town that this was an example of a product that Field Turf had installed. Field Turf being the company, not This is Field Turf. So, I mean, whether it's rolled up or laid out in 2.5 acre sheets, it's the same product.
Well,
and
I'm sure that company, I would assume that company makes multiple products and deploys multiple products.
Yeah.
I think it would be in the case, since they've apparently given us an assurance that the product to be installed does not contain PFAS, et cetera, et cetera. And this sort of experiment that happened with these rolled up pieces being left for 2 years and in fact leaking PFAS, would be important to know if it was the same exact product that was to be deployed. Otherwise, if it is the same product, then their insurance to us is questionable. If it's a different product, then you still have to go back to, they've said that this particular product doesn't contain PFAS and deal with it that way. But it would
Can't
be
we
a
ask the town to
contradiction to their
test it
assurance
before
if
they
we could
install
find
it?
out that this was the same product.
Can't we ask the town to test it before they install it?
Yeah. Honestly, from what I've seen and heard and talked with some residents about, because this is not a contract with the town, it's a contract with the Board of Ed.
Hmm.
There's not a whole lot that we can, as a town, mandate be done to prove certain things, unfortunately. It's mostly just a matter of presenting as much evidence, scientific based, and not hyperbole and
Right.
fear-based evidence. And then, of course, there's the bigger scope, and I think we've talked about it here before, is that after you roll out 2.5 acres of rubber and plastic on the ground, you got to rip it up after 8 years and put down a fresh layer of rubber and plastic. And the stuff that you ripped up goes somewhere. In Massachusetts, it went and sat in a field. And other places it goes into a landfill, and there are numerous massive landfills that are being built up with this stuff because it's getting buried. So the bigger global picture, not just Woodbridge scope, is something else that I think is important to consider when you're removing a natural product and replacing it with a man-made simulacrum of it. It's not the same.
Can the Amity Board of Ed make a contract to do something that's going to risk the public health of Woodbridge and other surrounding town residents?
I'll answer the question. From my perspective, it's an odd situation where 3 towns can dictate the water quality of one.
Yeah, it doesn't seem right. I mean, if they want to say, anything else, when you start impacting public health, I don't think
Right.
That's a whole different story.
Right. And I think because Woodbridge, especially the abutting neighbors that get their water from the wells, and to me, it's an analogy of, would you want a 2.5 acre used tire dump next to your house and drinking water from the ground? Because it's what you've got. You've got shredded tires laying out over 2.5 acres.
I don't think we can even bring tires to the dump anymore, right? Because they're
No, you can't.
right.
No, they need to be, and if you are a tire recycler, I looked this up, you have to get permits from the state of Connecticut to actually hold them and process them. So,
Jason, in what you're citing now, I listened to the subcommittee of the Board of Selectmen talking about creating an ordinance to consider whether turf should be allowed or not permitted, and whether if it wasn't permitted, whether it would have any impact on this situation or whether it would be just things going into the future.
Yep.
And I'm wondering if you're including that in, did you see that meeting, and do you want to include and summarize what you thought about that in terms of it affecting this question?
it's a good segue to move us forward, Sharon. Because
Okay.
the next agenda item is to get an update on the turf ordinance that's being proposed. So currently the town has no ordinance on artificial turf. I just want to back up one step and respond to something that was in the public comment earlier. There was a public comment about the lawsuit that was put forward by some of the town residents. The reason the lawsuit was retracted was not because of the concerns went away. It was retracted because there was not enough funding to continue the fight. I think if their pockets were as deep as the Amity Board of Ed, the fight would be continuing. But they had to retract it because they did not have the funds to move it forward. So the ordinance, no current ordinance against artificial turf in town. There are now 2 proposed variants of the ordinance moving forward to the Board of Selectmen for their April meeting. They're very similar. I think the only difference between the 2 is one has a second part that bans even organic infill products, and the other variation does not include that particular prohibition. I
My
would like
understanding
to,
is the organic products still have chemicals to adhere everything together. So yeah, you have some organic products, but their foundation is still some of these troubling chemicals.
right, the organic infill is merely what replaces the crumb rubber portion of the field. You still have the plastic sheet of grass. You just don't have several tons of shredded tires, not several tons, but many, many tons of shredded tire spread over it. You've got coconut husk. Trying to remember some of the other products that organics are, but um, I would like to offer the position of the Conservation Commission at that meeting. And I think we've sort of have a general consensus of what that looks like. Does
So
anybody?
my understanding is that it's gonna be, that it went forward to present it to the entire Board of Selectmen as a topic of interest to decide whether it was gonna be an ordinance in the future and how it would affect public land or private land, or, you know, how much it would include. And I think us getting educated about that and presenting to that would be I think could be helpful to them to help them make it the best
Yep.
decision.
Do we want to recommend which version of the ordinance we prefer?
Thoughts?
I don't think they're at that stage quite yet. I mean, I think my guess is we'd prefer not to have any artificial surfaces, but I think they have a wider scope that they're looking at before they either adopt either of those or make their own recommendation. It's
Yeah, I mean,
some hybrid.
Yeah, my personal recommendation would be that we do not have artificial turf in town. Just to me, as a person in town, I find it. I'll be very strong worded about it. I find it offensive that you would tear up grass and soil and replace it with man-made plastics and rubber, and find it to be an improved surface. It's not. Science just proves that it's not. So that's my stance. I don't want to have that necessarily be the stance of the whole commission. When I go before Board of Selectmen, I am representing the entire commission, not just myself. So I want to hear other thoughts.
Well, certainly from the perspective of conserving the earth, it isn't helping living things prosper. So the less intrusion, the better, in my opinion. Especially since I think there's some ordinance that says that we can't put harmful chemicals on the earth also.
Right.
So it's not like we'll be replacing that with terrible DDT. It's like we already have an attention to the fact that it's, any of this activity can be harmful. And so we're trying to do it as a town in the most effective way.
Yeah.
That is not harmful. So I would agree with you, Jason.
Yeah.
I do too. And what about like the GAA designation, that we're not supposed to put anything there that is going to, the seepage of the chemicals from this turf goes against the designation of the property. And we're not supposed to put things there because of that designation. Am I correct? I haven't researched this as much as I could have, but
Yeah, the GAA water classification, that definitely falls under the Department of Public Health. And it's an argument to be made, but DPH definitely did not offer a good way forward as that being a strong argument, which
okay.
was a little surprising, given the amount of people in our town who do drink the water in the ground here.
I think-
And also, I would also point out that it is typically untreated. My well pumps water right out of the ground into my tap. We don't have any filters in place.
Lucky.
Some people have got much harder water than we do, or maybe less tolerant of hard water than I am.
I think it's important that we remember as we go forward in this that Woodbridge did not vote to support this. And so while the letters might reference that it was the will of the voters, it was not the will of the voters in this town. So I'm very comfortable personally with you going to the ordinance hearing and
Okay.
making that case.
Me too, in case that's not clear.
Oh, there was an item Sharon brought up just a minute ago about the existing ordinance about treatment with pesticides. And, you know, I don't know that it's a question for this commission, but perhaps there's knowledge of this. Do we know if that ordinance pertains to the would-be turf field that will be installed at Amity?
I believe it only pertains to town land, town-owned. Sharon, do you know?
That's the distinction, and the other reference that Sharon made a minute ago in reference to the ordinance that for protecting future crumb rubber fields or artificial fields in the town, the language, how the language would be specified about whether it would be on any land or on town land or on, I forget the other term they use, public land. And the implication of that to the ability, you know, for in 8 or 10 years to rip it up and put down a new one. So those would be some questions I would be interested in as we go through before the Board of Selectmen, if you get an opportunity to explore that. Even with the ordinance about treatment, because I didn't think at the ordinance meeting that the town council was absolutely clear with that answer.
In terms of whether that the pesticide ordinance?
Yeah.
Yeah, the way that I recall it being, it was only applied to town-owned properties, so that the
Okay.
town maintenance staff were no longer spraying herbicides and pesticides.
Okay.
Don't hold me to that because I haven't read the
Yeah.
ordinance in a while.
Fine. The current ordinance, and I may have missed it. I tried to figure out where the proposed ordinances were available.
Yeah.
Before I listened to the meeting, and I couldn't find the proposed ordinances. So, would be interested to know if it's going to be written in such a way that it applies to all land in town.
Yeah, and then
even land owned by, of course, the Amity Regional School System.
yeah, and that was a topic that they discussed at the ordinance committee, whether this ordinance moving forward applies to public and private land or only public, meaning town-owned.
I heard.
Yeah. So that they sort of just punted that over to the Board of Selectmen.
But I think that is a crucial key issue.
It is. My position is that I don't think there's any good reason to install it anywhere in town, whether it's public or private.
And I wondered secondly about that ordinance, whether it includes language that addresses the periodic, which I guess would be annual refilling of the substance of the field.
Right. There was discussion, and if you would listen to the ordinance committee, you already know, but for those that didn't, there was discussion of whether or not, I think the term they used was prospective or retrospective. Anyway, looking forward, looking back was the discussion of whether or not this ordinance applies backwards. So if the turf field is installed, does this ordinance, or was the turf field about to be installed, the ordinance passes, does it suddenly stop the high school turf field from being put in? Apparently, you can have attorneys argue that to figure out if that works or not. Or it could be specified in the language of the ordinance, and the Board of Selectmen would make that determination.
I don't think we should concern ourselves with what's going to happen with the high school field. I think our concern should just be more with this ordinance of what we think is the best for the town.
Yeah.
The water supply.
Well, I largely agree with maybe the comments of one of the public comments tonight, but that this is probably a done deal. Currently, the question is what happens subsequent to its installation. And the little bit finer point I was trying to make, Jason, was that the field during the 8 or 10 years before it is replaced, and where the ordinance might apply, because it will be in fact, a new installation, and hopefully the language in the ordinance would support that view. You have the reconstitution of that surface
Mhm.
on a yearly basis, I assume, from what I've heard. And does that constitute, or the way the ordinance will be written, will that then violate the ordinance?
Right. Yeah.
That's a good question.
And factoring that ordinance the right way could, direct that answer.
Indeed. Yep.
So do we need to move to support you to represent us to the Board of Selectmen meeting, or can we just assume that you're going to do that, or do we need to make a motion?
I think if it's just general consensus, it's okay. If there's any concern or dissension, which I'm okay with, honestly, arguments make the world in many times a better place, having the different sides. So, but if there's general consensus, I don't think we need to have a motion.
Okay. Well, I support it.
Okay. Jason, I do have one other question in this topic area.
Yeah.
Or not, perhaps not a question, but a point. Well, it is a question. We had at one time talked about perhaps obtaining some baseline information,
Yes.
so that going forward we could understand whether we in fact had leakage.
Yep. And I commend you, Tim. Just like Sharon, you guys are doing great moving this agenda along. So the next item on the agenda,
Short memory on what the agenda is.
maybe there's something subconscious. Maybe you read it and it was there waiting.
It's in my notes, actually.
So the next agenda item is to discuss a townwide campaign on PFAS and water quality. And this is sort of following in the model that the state had put forward. The state has a PFAS task force. And at the end of 2019, they came up with a working document with recommendations moving forward. One of those recommendations being that throughout the state, people should be testing their water for these chemicals so that the state has an understanding of where the pollutants are currently greatest and where to focus their attention. Currently, DEEP has the expectation that the greatest PFAS impact and pollution is around manufacturing plants or where there's been a large fire and foam agents have been applied, although the foam agents, I hope at this point, might be no longer PFAS filled. But the state is looking to have private well water included in all of their testing, not just the public reservoirs. So I thought it would be wise, given all the alert attention at this point to people in town, especially those around the high school, to start joining forces with the state and promote a education on how to test for PFAS, why it's relevant, and how we could actually help the state with their scientific endeavors moving forward. So I reached out
So
to
it's detected. Well, go ahead.
so
Go
I
ahead.
reached
I thought you were done.
so I reached out to the Regional Water Authority, and even if you do not get your water from a public source like the Regional Water Authority, if you get it from private wells, they will do the testing for you. They will mail you a kit that you will then fill with water and you'll get it back to them. It's not free, of course. Nothing in life is. PFAS testing is expensive. It is $200. I also asked about lead, zinc, and arsenic. Each of those are $20 each. I picked those because those are also chemicals that have been identified as runoff and also hazardous to human health. So I asked DEEP and DPH if they have funding available to assist those that could not afford that type of testing. And they said they are offering it to areas of known contamination at this point. So maybe if there's enough of us that are able to do testing and we find that there are some weird pockets in town that have contamination, DEEP or DPH might focus some of their money in our area and support additional testing. So back to Tim's point, base level, this is one opportunity to try to make the public aware and get some base level testing of PFAS in various private wells in the area.
I vaguely remember Michelle Cohen being involved in, or somebody who was involved when this first came up a while ago that I heard about later, to get some testing in some of those local houses nearby.
Yep.
And I know our budget's very small, but maybe we could choose one house and offer to fund that for at least a baseline of one, and then redo it in a year.
Is
Maybe.
there any liability with that though?
Yeah, I like the idea, but I also feel like if the town starts spending money on private properties, it gets a little weird.
Yeah.
It's certainly not unheard of. I'm sure.
But
it has
maybe
been
we can
done.
test the high school water.
Well,
They
the high
have
school
city
gets
water.
the
That's
high
city
school
water.
gets its
Never
water
mind.
from RWA, and RWA has
Yep,
enough treatment
yep,
that their
yep.
water is nice and clean.
Yes, no, that's right. I forgot that. Okay.
What happens if it's found? There's no remediation for it, right?
So it depends upon the level of PFAS in particular. The other chemicals, lead, arsenic, zinc, there are all various mitigation that you can install in your home to help with it. I believe I've read that activated charcoal filtering. Activated charcoal filters can reduce the PFAS contamination in drinking water. I mean, there is the argument to be made that if we get enough people testing their well water now, and then the turf field goes in, and in another year they do another test and find that their PFAS or other heavy metal levels have drastically risen to the point where they now need to remediate their water, there could be an argument to be made that the high school now needs, or the Board of Ed now needs to pay for it because the only change in pollutants in the area have been that field.
So we could probably identify the most likely homes that would be reflective of that change.
It's tricky. And that's why I had sent around the information about how groundwater moves. You'd think that it would be those that were closest to the high school, but because these chemicals don't break down and they travel in water, it could be, my home, which is 2 miles from the high school, but completely downhill next to the Weppawag, where the water is eventually drained. So
I would think the case would be easier to make if it was a house nearby. Otherwise, you could possibly say it came from any number of other sources. And it was just a fluke, or I understand that that's not real, but in terms of
and I do want to. So this was the point of trying to do a public awareness campaign townwide, and those that are neighbors in the vicinity of the high school might want to get some extra nudges to say you really ought to, if for nothing else, to assuage your fears, so that you test now and then you test in another year and the levels haven't changed.
Yeah. Jason, this might show some my naiveness in this area, but I guess I had anticipated that the testing would not be so much at wells and trying to go all around town and test people's wells, but that would be in the nexus of where the fields are, and would be testing, could be done as a test to the either surface or the shallow water in the soils, that would show whether in fact you were getting leakage from the turf fields themselves. So just as was done at Town Hall, I believe, when they had the oil spill back some number of years ago, they put in a series of testing sites that were just essentially holes in the ground at various sites, and where they took samples and monitored that this would be something of the same order. Is that just naive, or in this type of chemical leaching? Do you know?
I mean, we could. Again, we get into that play of the town trying to test private property. And like I said, I'm sure it's been done before. We would certainly need permission from the landowner to test their water.
Yeah. Or they volunteer to do it after the education you talked about. But just thinking that if you're testing I mean, the leakage and transportation through the ground must take some time.
Mhm.
So you would find out sooner if there was a problem if you tested nearer to where the source was concerned. We had concern
Good
about the
point.
source. So but that would be, you figure out a perimeter and then figure out who has to give permissions. And I don't, I don't know exactly where all the turf is going. I've heard us talk about the football field, and I know where that is. And is it going on the other athletic fields, the soccer fields, or no?
No, not that I'm aware of. That would be definitely a ball coming out of left field on that one. That would
Yeah.
that
Okay.
would be a new twist.
Well, but again, you can look at the maps and figure out who's around, and then try to
It
figure
could
out.
even be Amity School District land possibly, because there's land that buffers.
Well, it would be best to. It would be easiest to do the testing right on the school grounds, I would think,
Mhm.
right outside the turf field. Now, can that be negotiated with the Amity school system? Especially since a number of our children go to the schools, and we have concerns as citizens. Maybe so, but I guess we would have to.
I think that would be a good pitch to the Board of Ed or even the environmental club at the high school. Try to get the students interested in it and try to have them perform some studies. Connections to the science teachers would also be an approach.
Yeah.
So anyway, that was my thought. Was let's try to educate the community about it, and I wanted to just sort of bring it up to see what everybody else thought. Is it worth making this recommendation to the Board of Selectmen that the town, in a mailer that goes out coming up, that they educate the community about this water quality and how it connects with the state's greater efforts, and offer resources about where you can go and get the testing done. Is that something
Yeah.
we feel we should do? I'm judging by a nod and silence that it's a good idea.
Well, no, I'm thinking that we should maybe think about it more than just this moment, because I think it seems like the Board of Selectmen is interested in really evaluating the turf thing. And I think if we approach it in a way that really is supportive of the health of the Woodbridge residents, I think it's a good idea.
Yeah.
I don't know. I just think we should maybe really think through it and maybe talk to Beth Heller, get a better sense of it before we propose it necessarily, because we're already I don't feel like we've thought through it enough to feel comfortable with that proposal, though I do think in essence it's a good idea, but it involves money and science and doing something now and later. And I just feel like we should maybe have a better way to propose it.
My thinking of a way to actually knock a cost down on it is there is a townwide election coming up, and there's an opportunity to get an additional piece of paper in to that packet that goes out to all residents.
Oh.
So
I don't see where a suggestion for people around the school to have their wells tested would be so overbearing. In a pamphlet or something. Just my take
No, I
on
don't
it.
think so either. I think we just have to think about how to do it and who to propose it to first, and how we want to best initiate it so it's most effective and best received. There's a lot of people who are very pro this turf who will be thinking, I just think it will raise a lot of shackles and create more of a battle than we just want science to help keep people safe and preserve the land. That's our essence. And I just don't know that I just can't see into how we do that in a way that's most useful right now. But I'm not opposed. I think water quality is key to our town, and it obviously isn't as important to Bethany and Orange as it is to us that our water quality is good. And I think our town has an important place to take care of it, you know, its resource, and water is a key one.
Tracy?
You have to be careful. I don't think we can only recommend people around the high school test their wells. I think that's risky because now we're suggesting we think there's going to be a problem, and then if they find a problem, are we making, I think you raised this, Kate, are we saying, oh, the town is all liable? I think we should either blanket, have everyone test it in the interest, you know, deep recommending people do this, or DPH, whoever it is. We're bringing our town support to people doing it. I don't think we should limit it to surrounding houses.
Right.
Maybe it's something that, and I, again, piggybacking on what Tracy said, that a lot of us have well water. This is a good practice to have on a every couple year basis anyway. And so doing an ad campaign, Jason, that you said, that can go out in the flyer and that is not tied to this kind of, as Sharon said, incendiary issue, but encourages best practices of, you know, getting your water directly from the ground. And then that's something that I think we can share on various social media networks, and that doesn't automatically kind of get half the town's hackles up.
Yeah.
Right. And I understand completely how it can be perceived as an attack against the turf field. I think the better approach is to just make it clear that the state sort of activated this PFAS task force, and they're very much interested in collecting as much data as possible throughout the state. And that maybe Woodbridge water is sparkling clean from PFAS. I mean, that would be an important data point for the state to know.
And I think it is an important data point that if we are doing things that add possible PFAS, we should be conscious of it, because that's an important, you know, thing to preserve our water supply.
And I had asked Deep if they would be interested if we were able to get a number of residents to do the testing, and would they be willing to share the data with the state? And they were very receptive to receiving that data. So unsurprisingly, I mean, they're scientists, they want the data.
Mm-hmm.
Homeowners might be,
Studies too, because you know, it's 5, 10 years from now, 20 years from now, that there could be impacts, health impacts.
Mm-hmm. All right, so should I do a little more background to figure out, could we get something in the mailer for the upcoming election, and maybe put a draft together of what it might look like before we kind of push this forward?
yes. Jason, if you want help with cheeky graphics, let me know.
Oh, that's great.
Thank
We
you,
can,
Kate.
no reason it can't be fun.
Yep. All right. Anything else on this one? So now we finally get to the real meat of the meeting at an hour and 15 minutes. So, cognizant of time, and as it gets later, our brains tend to sometimes, for those that are not evening people, get a little more punchy and foggy. But Tim did some excellent work on revamping the use designations, and it's a whole new twist on what had been looked at years ago. I'd circulated it around to everybody, and let's see. First of all, did everybody get a chance to open it up? Okay.
Can I interject something even before, and I have to admit I didn't open it up, because I have a partner who's a husband who's on land trust. They're working on the similar issues, and I think somebody said Coopop is working on similar issues, and it seems like it might be something we all have a joint Zoom meeting about and try to create a synergistic plan as well as individual plans.
I didn't know the land trust was working on it. I know
they're just started and they've come along. I was overhearing a conversation or two, and it seems like I think it would be an interesting discussion for all of us to share together, since we have similar aims in that.
Tim, you want to take a lead here?
Well, excuse me. I will comment, Jason, that we have the opportunity tomorrow morning perhaps to ask about what the land trust is doing and find out who the right contacts are. Sharon, if you don't know who specifically is working at it on the land trust, and determine what they're doing. If
I think
it differs.
it's, well, yeah, I can find out.
Well, no, I'm saying Jason and I have a meeting tomorrow morning where we will be engaged with one of the land trust board members, and we can ask and find out some more. As
Who
far
is
as
it? So
Coupop,
I can have Chris send any stuff to them in case he has anything that could be sent.
I'm sorry, Sharon, I over talked your start of your.
Sorry, I'm just wondering who that board member is so that we could, if Chris, my husband, has some information, he could send it to that person so that you guys could
Oh,
have some.
and I'm sorry, I forgot already that you said your husband was on the land trust. So that was a little foolish in my comment. That was Chuck Pine.
Chuck Pine. Okay, so my husband, I have to leave this meeting for 1 sec because my husband just asked me, so I'll ask him right now also. So I'll just.
Tim, you did great work. I'm particularly excited about the scenic aesthetic use designation, and I would like to make most of the town.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that.
I don't think it precludes other things, but I liked that one.
I also like
We'll
that.
use it often.
I also like that multiple designations can be applied to a single parcel.
Yeah.
Where the previous structure was that there was one type of designation. So I think it adds a great deal of detail, meaningful detail, not just detail for the sake of adding detail.
Yeah.
I think we found the thing that sparks joy for Tim in terms of our calendar of projects.
Well, just trying to move it along. So, Sharon, we all set?
Yeah, we're all set. I might get interrupted again, but I just spoke to Chris. They don't have it far enough along to share it yet. But I think, and he mentioned that just the whole land trust probably needs to talk about it first. But so maybe I'm obviously a little premature, but I think it would be an interesting momentum to.
Well, what I would like to convey to them at least is the fact that we are doing this and that our effort was meant to be collaborative in the sense of when we get to a point of we're comfortable going out to other town organizations and making sure that this is comprehensive. And maybe we save them, just like we stopped to check if Coupop has already had this done. Maybe we save them from taking on that work if it will help them. As far as Coupop goes, we did run that down to the extent we could. And found there was no there, that the reference seemed to be to the Plan of Conservation and Development appendix that came out in 2018. Do I have the year right? And so given that, I did go ahead and try to expand, Sharon, and address your question from last time. Do we have descriptions of these perhaps categorizations? So with that, Jason, I guess I'll yield it back and let you drive this at this late hour to where you want to go.
So where do I want to go? I think the next stage with this is to give it a more thorough review. I know we spent a lot of time this evening talking about the turf field because it happens to be a hot topic at the moment. I'm really good about pushing stuff off to the next meeting. It'll be done in 2 weeks. I swear, it'll be in 2 weeks. I would
We
like
thought
to,
we'd have this done at the first meeting of the year, right? As I remember.
Yeah. I think, all right, so my personal thought is that applying it to a piece of property, like giving it a real application, is a good way to test it. And I might just on my own pick a property, or maybe 5 properties that are currently in the open space plan of properties of interest. So it's not completely random properties, it's those that we've had an eyeball on for a while,
Mhm.
and maybe try to apply a designation to them and see what it looks like. And maybe we pick 5 right now, and all of us on our own try to use this tool and come back next time and say, here's what I think each of these parcels was, and see if we agree. I think that's one way to test it, to see if it's clear in its
I
application.
like that. So we will have that, is it the document we already have or a separate document that you'd send that we then, and you give us 5 different properties and we just
It's
figure it out just from the space and from what animals we think might be there? I mean, you'll give us the criteria to work with.
Well, it's the draft that was included in the email with the agenda and the minutes. So
Right.
you've got that already.
Yeah.
Uh,
So Jason, let me jump in and comment. I think there might be a little confusion and perhaps use a different word than you just did, which was tool, to apply to this, what I is just look at as just a classification system.
Yeah.
That we are, as our second priority for the year, I think, going to be working on an evaluation tool, which will use these classifications within it to help evaluate properties and designate the use, but will incorporate some other information in that tool. But I don't think you're suggesting, Jason, we try to use a total evaluation tool yet.
Right.
I think you're just suggesting we take and try to, with 5 properties each of, that's what we say, that if you do that, do you find the designations for the use on this list? And if not, what are we missing? Which is what really I'm after too, is it complete? Does it work, or is it, or do we need to refine it because it doesn't quite match the type of properties we have in town or are interested in, I guess. Fair summary on that?
Yep.
I have a thought. Is there any way that we could do a test run where we pick a 6th property that we all sort of just do together, so that we kind of have a process that is somewhat similar, so that then we take that process and do it on our own for 5 other properties? Does that make sense? Because I'm not sure. I mean, maybe other people feel more like they understand the tool enough. I haven't looked at it enough. So
Well, there is no tool here, though.
I think, so here's what my thought on it was, and maybe going with properties that are already fairly well known might be easier. So Fitzgerald, for example, I think we all know what the Fitzgerald tract looks like. My thinking was that look at these use designations with their acronyms and their descriptors and identify, does the Fitzgerald tract meet the ALU, agricultural land use designation? Does it meet the EHU, the ecological biological habitat use classification or designation? And my thought was that if we do this on our own, and then we come back together and compare our notes, we'll have sort of this independent review going on to determine whether or not the designations are clear and how they might be applied. Because some of the properties I think that we could pick as tests are so well known, it should be almost spot on that we all pick the same ones. That was my thought, as one way to sort of vet the application of these designations.
What is remaining from this particular piece for us to be able to kind of get the green check mark on it?
Whether or not we like it, honestly.
Yeah.
And then what we would do is we would share it with the other organizations, COOPOP, Land Trust, Parks Association, Rec. I mean, ultimately, it could be something that the town has on reference for use, and incorporated as part of the ranking system, at least for the use by conservation.
Okay.
Yeah.
I mean, Tim, I mean, it's very detailed. It seems pretty much there. I don't know, unless there's like a gotcha in there on a designation that you didn't include that we were supposed to catch.
No, I'm not that smart. Well,
Um,
but you know, obviously, I think there was other applications of the designations, and I was hoping that people with greater wisdom of this group could help fill it in a little bit. And then, as Jason said, if we're comfortable with it, that, you know, for now, and it's not going to be, it's going to change over time because we'll learn and we'll discover, and it's to be expected. But and I agree with giving it a quick trial run across properties we know. That seems a reasonable way to give it, you know, just test it a little bit. And then, as Jason also said, then, you know, and I tried to build into the document, you know, we do need to run it past the other organizations to get feedback from them. And then hopefully it becomes something we can go to the town with and say, hey, we recommend we use this across the town, across all the organizations and entities, and have a common language so that we can exchange our ideas more efficiently in this area. And it will help in our planning for the town.
So can I give everybody homework?
yeah.
So let's pick a couple properties. And I think this is also homework that'll make sure we get in and read the document and digest it in a more meaningful way. So Fitzgerald, I think because we all know Fitzgerald in some fashion, why don't we pick that as one of the properties to look at and figure out what acronyms apply to that. We could go with properties that are already built as a good example. So let's go with the town center. So, I mean, I know town center is Meeting House Lane, library, town hall, church. Let's take it as one big piece.
Okay.
We'll just call it town center.
But Jason, when we're thinking of these, we're thinking of like a tract of land that isn't already owned by the town. When we actually apply it to what we might want to buy, correct? We're just trying to understand how it applies to what we do have so that we can then apply it to land that we, excuse me.
Yes, you got it.
You know what I mean? So,
Yes.
I mean, I think it's good to choose pieces that we know because then we can speak with some information. But eventually, if we're researching a piece of land, we have to get the data on whether there's agricultural use or historic use or whatever.
Exactly. Yeah,
Is that
you got the right
right?
idea.
Okay. Okay.
Does anyone want to recommend some others?
I think 3 is plenty, and I would recommend maybe, how about the Darling House?
That was going to be my next recommendation. So,
I mean, it's things we know so that we have enough to understand what's there.
Can I throw a little wrench in this?
please.
So I would like to propose that we do like a retroactive one on the piece of property that is now going to be the solar farm so that we can use that as kind of maybe a learning tool. I know that we didn't all get to walk it, but kind of envisioning maybe that, because I think in some ways maybe a lack of creative thinking about what things can be might be limiting us in how we envision our scope.
I think that's a fair addition.
I think that's a good point.
So we should be thinking about the solar site as it was before it was sold?
Yeah.
Imagine way back.
That's not to say that I'm not happy that it's a solar farm now, but I think that's one of those properties where we're like,
And do you know that the land trust is thinking about or working on or in process with some land near there too? And so they're doing that prospectively right now.
Good. Yeah, because there is that parcel at the end of Park Lane that is for sale. And I think it's about 10 or 11 acres. All right, so 4 properties: Fitzgerald, Town Center, the Darling House, and 57 Park Lane before it was cleared.
Tough. Oh, go ahead, Sharon.
I'm sorry. You know what would also help me is like once we were to identify a piece of land, I have really no awareness since I've been on the commission. We haven't identified a piece of land because we're in this process. Like, do we then go to the Board of Selectmen? Do we then create a site plan? Do we then petition people in town? I mean, how do we then get it from we're interested, we think it's a valuable piece of land to the town buying it?
It would be a recommendation from us to the town saying we should purchase this property to protect it for these reasons. So we would need a clear write-up and description of why we think it's important, what makes it valuable, and why the town should spend the money or go out and bond to spend the money on that particular parcel, or apply for this grant to then purchase the parcel. But I think anything that we recommend to the town can't just be, hey, it's open space for sale, we have to buy it. It needs to have a little more depth to it. And
Right, and that's why we're doing all this, to give it that depth.
Yeah.
And just one point of history, when was the last time the Conservation Commission actually recommended a piece of land that was actually bought by?
it was actually purchased. I want to say it was before me. I think it was probably the top end of Racebrook Tract, where it comes out on Clearview
right.
Road, right off of Johnson Road. I think that was in 07 or 08. It was a couple purchases that the town made to buy the top end of that property. I mean, other than the 2009 purchase of the country club.
Right. Okay, thank you.
I think that might be it.
So Jason, back to the exercise,
Yep.
A clarifying question. We want to try to apply these use designations and the protection codes as far as we know in our just general knowledge.
As far as you know, so the second part.
Not asking anybody to go to town hall and try to dig around in the deeds.
So the second part of this document is beyond the use designations is the property protection types. And I think go with what you know, or if you want to go the extra mile, you could try to dig around the land records online.
Online, yeah.
And just so you know, the town does have all of its land records going back to 1930, I think, online. If you, I don't have the link handy, but if you email Steph Charleglio at the town hall, she can provide you the link to be able to search land records, which is helpful for my personal knowledge. I mean, my house goes back to the 1830s. I would like to go that far back in the town records, but not yet.
Jason, an additional clarification, so as we look at these 4 pieces of property now, we're going to catalog our thoughts on the current use of the properties.
Yes, as they stand today.
As
Except
they
for Park
stand
Lane.
today. You know, not because the codes were hopefully designed in such a way that we could, in applying them, we could apply current use and then apply a future use in
Okay.
certain contexts. You know, we wouldn't always need to do that, but there, you know, as we look at property, land across town and start cataloging it and planning, we're going to want to say, well, right now this is an X, but in the future we see it being used as a Y.
Yep.
Because that would fit a greater goal of the town.
Yeah, and that kind of gets to Kate's point that 57 Park Lane became a solar farm.
Yeah.
And it was never in our imagination that it would do that. It was
Yeah.
always, it would
Well,
become a house.
Yeah, I was talking today to someone about this a little bit and was saying that, I thought a good use of this might help in situations similar to our recent cell towers events, where, it looked like the town scrambled to come up with some alternatives to the site that was being proposed. And this might allow you to have some alternatives identified. Think places that are most suitable for a communications tower, and therefore maybe prevent some of the back and forth that's gone on the current cell tower.
Exactly. Yep. And that was sort of the genesis of this whole project going years back, was to make it clear to people that these are good uses or potential uses and current uses. So good work. All right. Is everybody clear? All right. Anything more on this agenda item before I move on?
Well,
Yes.
I'm going to attach something to it since harking back, I'm not running afoul of these special meeting rules. Knowing that this was, we're discussing the first priority for our year, and I believe the second priority is the parcel evaluation tool.
Yep.
Given that this seems to have a somewhat good reception, I would like to sort of move forward and draft in the use of these types of designations into the tool. As I sent you a draft earlier, or Jason, you and I had started talking about that tool, and I had a take on it. So I'd like to update that and put it within that tool, because I think that will quickly come up to the commission once we settle on these designations.
Yep. I'm totally okay with kind of
Okay.
moving forward, bleeding into the next big item for us
Yeah.
to take up, which is that rating tool.
Yes.
Have at it.
What Tracy said.
Yeah. And anybody have any input for me, please?
It's all you.
Send me an email.
Tim, you and I can certainly go back and forth a bit and have something ready.
Yeah. I mean, it's not much of a change from what I had already sent over to you, Jason. Hopefully we'll get to share that at some point. And I don't think we've settled on it. So
yeah,
maybe we have some more back and forth.
Yep.
Okay.
Sounds good. All right. Last item, chairman's report. I think this chairman has reported on everything that's been going on up until now. So I've got nothing else to report right now. All right. With that, I'll make a motion to adjourn. No
One second.
seconds? Oh, okay. All in favor?
Aye.
All right. Thank you, everybody.
Aye.
Have a good night.